Hello, thank you for joining me today. I am Jamie Campbell, and today we're going to be talking about branding pipelines. So let's begin. Just to give you a little background about me, again, that is the warm, sunny day in State College, Pennsylvania. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my research areas and why I came to this. I am definitely interested in diversity, crisis management, and succession planning because I think they all have great intersections to work from. In terms of my education, I'm a graduate of Morehouse College with a degree in sociology, Central Michigan University with a master's in adult ed and instructional ed. And I'm currently completing, hopefully, my doctorate degree from the Pennsylvania State University in organization design and human resource development. Currently, I serve as the Assistant Dean for Diversity Enhancement Programs within the Smale College of Business. I also have taught within this college, the College of Business, as well as within African American Studies, which is in the College of the Liberal Arts. But today, I want you to stop for a minute, and I want you to think about just maybe the last job you had. And I want you to look at this poll. When we come together, we're going to remember what we said, and don't worry, I'll remind you. But we want you to think about, why did you leave that last job? I also want you to think about where you're currently employed. What brought you there? Even if it's just the salary or if they had a good cafeteria, we still want to know what got you to switch jobs. And lastly, what we're going to be focusing on in great detail today. Do you think there's an employment shortage? As a note, and before I even was able to complete this presentation, I took a trip to Ocean City, Maryland. And every place we went, my family and I, there was a sign in the window that said, "Hey, please be patient with us. We're short employees." And I couldn't quite wrap my head around it because it seemed like there were a lot of people there that could be working. But I want you to take the time, think about these answers to these three questions, and we'll come back to it. So, many organizations, when they're setting out to be what they're trying to be or what they're aspiring to, they establish a brand. And that brand is not so much what they're doing, but who they are. And so in establishing that brand, they often feel like people are just going to gravitate to us. The talent is going to gravitate to us. We're going to always be able to seek the best talent because we're company X and we've done such great work. Well, what we want to do in this presentation today is we want to figure out if that's true, one. Two, we also want to be able to figure out if it's not true, how can we strengthen that? So we want to have this type of engagement. And as you hear me talking, you'll often hear me say we. Very rarely will you hear me say I. We. Because part of the program that we're going to be doing today is it's going to be a conversation. It's going to be an opportunity for both you and I to work things out. Now, granted, we won't solve all of the problems of the universe in 45 minutes or even in the 20 minutes that I have in front of me, but maybe we can come up with one or two ideas that we can take back to our places of employment or our academic institutions that could be helpful. Because this idea of talent drought isn't going away. And it's becoming more prevalent that it seems like it's a brand new problem. So in today's session, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about brands. And I hope that when we get to interact that we'll have maybe a bigger discussion about it. But we're going to talk about brands. We're going to enter into a problem statement. And then we're going to look at 4 points to figure out how we can strengthen those pipelines to end this talent drought. Then we're going to move into question and answer. And that, of course, will occur when we're actually in front of each other and are able to talk. And then we're going to leave. But we're going to leave with the idea that we're going to have action items, things that we can take back to maybe improve our talent, improve what we can do. So I'm hoping that we can have a great, robust dialogue. So I've got 2 quotes, and I'm going to give you a second or two to read them. One is from the great Wolfgang Puck, and if you're like me, you like to eat, and so he's great. He's a fantastic chef. But what's important is what he's saying in this statement. As a waiter, and I want to highlight the point that he says there are some waiters that make $120,000 a year, and he can't find them. If you work for Wolfgang Puck, you're working for one of the best. How could you not have people coming and clamoring to you? That brand he, as a person, has established with his restaurants, outstanding. But when we look at this quote, we think, oh, well, that's only in the service industry. And many of you have heard that with COVID, that service industry workers are being hard pressed to find. Well, there's some things with that. But also, if you take a look at the CEO of Wells Fargo, now his comment intersects on a couple of things. His comment intersects on diversity because he said there's a very limited pool of black talent. That's something for us to think about. He also said within specific industry roles. So that means that going back, he can't find anyone in these roles. Now, he said this in a private, yes, we're using air quotes, in a private note in June. And then when it became popular, or when word got out, he then issued an apology in September. June, July, August, September. 4 months. What was the epiphany? What happened to make him say, well, maybe I misspoke? Well, again, as we're looking at what these talent pipelines are doing, we're saying there are people out there, but maybe there's something that we're not doing to get the talent to want to work for us. So when we talk about this topic, and even when I was formulating how I was going to bring this to you, one of the things that always struck me was that what we have, especially now within the global pandemic, is people saying, well, I can't find people to work for me. One of the things that we've always seen is that people are willing to work. However, people are willing to work in conditions that are appropriate. They are willing to work for fair wages. They are willing to work for fair treatment. They are willing to work when they know there's fair advancement. These large organizations are saying, well, we have all these vacancies. How do we minimize that? And they're not doing a lot to do and they're not doing anything different to make sure that they're getting these vacancies filled. So, if you look at it and you think about it, right, we had Wolfgang Puck, the CEO from Wells Fargo, and they said, we can't find anybody. The latest jobs report, and this is from the U.S. Labor Department, said there are over 200,000 jobs openings. This is not people who've been fired, terminated, or separated, or laid off. Just openings. In the retail trade, there are over 133,000. And even in accommodation and food services, like Mr. Puck, there are over 100,000 positions open. So some would say, well, there are jobs out there. Why aren't people going for them? What we have to do is look at the deep dive of it. And again, I want to use this in a current model of time because we're coming out of this COVID pandemic, or at least I hope we are. And what we're seeing is people are saying, well, I can balance out staying at home and receiving benefit if this job is not paying me what's equitable. Not equal, equitable. What's fair work, fair wage for a fair day. Think about it for a second. Many states only have a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. To put this in perspective, let's talk about a $7.25 an hour wage. Let's talk about a $3 gallon of gas. Well, that only leaves you $4 left to do everything else you need to do for the day. Now, granted, I know that's not exactly how you would line that up, but think about it for a second. If you're not being paid an adequate wage, how do you feel comfortable about going to work? And remember, business is business. Remember, I work in a business college, so I understand that idea. But we're moving away from business is business. Remember, there's a wonderful phrase known as people, planet, profit. We care about all of these things. And as good citizens, we want to make sure that people are treated fairly and equitably. So maybe we need to start looking at how we're paying folks to work. So again, if Wolfgang Puck and all of his wonderful restaurants and nice ambiance can't find talent, what does that mean for the rest of us who are looking for educators, who are looking for accountants, who are looking for welders and things of that nature? What does this mean for us that are fighting for talent? Well, it means a couple of things. The first thing it means is we have to rethink how we're staffing our organizations. We have to rethink, look at what this dynamic is. We can't afford any longer to do a spray and pray. We can't do a post, and because we're organization X and we've been here for 100 years, that people are going to come to us. We've got to rethink that. We also need to understand why talent is leaving. A very wise person once told me that people don't leave jobs. What they told me was people leave people. And there have been a ton of reports that say, well, there's one in particular I want to highlight that says, if you had the opportunity to fire your manager or give up your bonus, what would you do? Think about that for a second. You have your bonus, you can fire your manager. Which would you take? Well, let me help you. Over 70% of the people said they would fire their manager because they liked their job. So people don't leave jobs, they leave people. What are we doing to keep our pipeline moving? How are we retaining employees? And this is where we talk about succession planning. This is where we look at what's next. Who is next in the line? How are we looking at those groups? What are we targeting? What are we engaging to make sure that as we move forward, the table is no longer looking exactly the same in every chair? What are we doing to find qualified people? How do we promote these qualified folks? And remember, when we talk about promoting qualified people, we're talking about engaging people who are qualified so that they are in a proper position at the proper time. That does not mean we're hiring a woman for the sake of hiring a woman, an African American for hiring the sake of an African American, or hiring someone Latinx or someone who is a different orientation or trans, just to say we have a trans person in the system. That's not what we're saying. We're saying, and I'm saying we're saying we want to find quality people. And lastly, how are we engaging our employees in just more than the work? What's in it for them? Why do they want to come here every day? Well, it's about pipelines, right? And we know that pipelines just mean they carry material from one end to another. Now, granted, I use oil pipelines and I use pipelines outside. Please don't take any partial to it, but it was the quickest thing I could find. But in its point, A to B, we get people from start to finish. We get people from elementary school to college to corporate to retirement. How do we make these people lifelong employees where we're engaging? Where are we looking for these people? What makes our pipeline stronger? And it means, and this is a long return on investment piece, but it means we need to go into elementary schools and middle schools and talk about our places of employment. Remember what the gentleman from Wells Fargo said. He said, we can't find an industry. Well, if you're not finding the apples in the orchard that you're currently looking in, sometimes you need to make your own orchard. If the wine isn't great as you would like it, sometimes you need to grow your own grapes. By going into the elementary schools and middle schools, you begin to set this up so that by the time these students go to college, not only are they familiar with the brand of your organization, but they're also familiar with the section that you need them to work in. And as they move into your company, you then have a situation where they are now stronger in the company. They become better mentors because they can talk more about what they did. They have this journey. And as they retire, they'll be willing to give back to the organization that supported them. And talent leaving. And when I thought of these things, and I'm sure you could think of some more, but talent leaving is costly. I want to target that because it costs to train employees. It also is something where you're training them and now they're taking their talent to somewhere else. What could you have done to retain that? I want to skip through and say because talent leaving should also be anticipated. There are some people that may not be a good fit or may not be doing well in the organization that you might need to replace. Talent leaving also means if you have good people, someone may be after them as well. And that's okay. You want your people to flourish so that they always remember where they got their start. You want your people to flourish so that when they leave, they can say, well, you know what? I worked at company X for 30 years. I loved it. It was just time. And that's okay. Talent leaving is also informative. It's informative because if you have a lot of your talent leaving, especially your diverse talent, you may understand and you may start to see where the problems are. So that's important to remember. When it comes to retention, everything from employee resource groups to mentoring is also important, but I want to touch this last one most of all, wages. We know that there is a wage gap currently still in this country. Women CEOs make 84 cents to every $1 that every male makes, 77 cents to every dollar that every male employee makes. These things are important to understand. You want to retain the best workers, make sure they're paying. It's okay to do an audit, and you can do an internal audit. HR has these resources. You can do the internal audit, you can engage, and you can figure out who's out of frame. So it doesn't have to be a big production, but you can work this through. Transparency about how bonuses are done will also serve as a good note. And the engagement, when we talk about giving the employee something more than just being able to say, oh, you work at company X, so this is great. It's not about that. It's about that engagement, it's about that development, and it's about how we push forward. So, to summarize this, we want to understand that companies, when they're recruiting, can't just rely on their brand. They can't just focus on who they are. What organizations need to make sure they're doing is not only focus on who they are, but who their employees are. Who do they want to work for them? How can they engage and how can they be more thoughtful in bringing on new staff to grow, to learn, and to develop? So at this point, I'll end, but hopefully you'll have some questions, you'll have some thoughts, and we can talk a little bit further. Thank you for joining. Again, my name is Jamie Campbell. You can feel free to reach me at juc27 at psu.edu, which is my email. Thank you, and I look forward to speaking with you.